So if you woke up in Middle Tennessee this morning, you woke up probably, for most of you, to storms. Some places got missed, but there's a storm also going on regarding tariffs. That's been a big topic. I thought I would just do an explanatory video to help you understand a little bit of what's happening and how it fits in with markets. You've been hearing about markets being down, some more than others. More about that in just a second. But if we look at what has been happening, there was a big meeting yesterday, big news conference where Trump is talking about his tariffs. And there's been all kinds of confusion. What's going on? How's that going to affect companies' bottom lines? Because, companies sell things. They have the costs of goods sold, and you can have those costs go up. Operating expenses can go up, and taxes are part of that formula that determine earnings. And stocks go up and down based on how those earnings change, and companies will adapt to what's going on, as I've often talked about. But here's the thing I want you to get is what's happening and just an understanding of how it all fits in. Now, number one, downturns in the stock market, they're pretty common. We look at 5% intra-year downturns, meaning a 5% downturn occurs inside of a year. And you've been hearing 4, 5, 6%. As of the time I'm doing this recording right now, that's what it is, but who knows what it will be as the day goes on. But 5% intra-year downturns happen about 3 times per year on average. Pretty common. 10% about once per year on average. That doesn't even mean that the stock market ends down. It could go down and come back, pretty quickly, and it often does. But I want you to understand a little bit about what's happening and why it's creating these downturns and how it's affecting various markets. Now, number one, what they had is this tariff. His whole thing was being talked about as how the tariffs are actually coming in, how we're figuring out our tariffs on other countries. And the way I explained it to my son this morning, I said, man, it's kind of like this. You have a trade deficit. So let's say that a country imports $5 worth of stuff from us, just to keep this really simple. And they export $10 worth of stuff to us. That would be the trade deficit right there, okay? Now, if we look at the amount of stuff that they exported to us right there, and we put that down here in the denominator, you got -5 divided by 10, that's, negative 0.5 or -1/2, right? Or that's 50%. Let's just put it that way, okay? So that's basically what we're dealing with. We're going like, okay, that's their tariff on us. And you go, well, wait a minute, that's kind of odd. And CNBC was actually talking a little bit about this, and Sarah Eisen, who tends to be fairly balanced on these types of things, she was talking about this very thing. And look, I'm just going to have you listen to what she had to say about it.
How did they get to those tariff rates? I think that when we figured out that was a little puzzling, because what we have confirmed now is the way they got to those rates. There's the formula. It looks kind of complicated, but it's actually rather simple. They took the trade deficit, the administration took the trade deficit and divided it by the imports from that country to the United States, and then assumed that number, that rate that they got, was all the ways that they're ripping us off, whether it's currencies or taxes or tariffs. The problem with that is that assumes that we will have balanced trade as long as they're not cheating us, which doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense because we don't produce coffee in this country. We don't grow bananas in this country. There's economic theory where things are made overseas and we buy them overseas. It also, and just to get a little bit more wonky in terms of the economics of this, assumes that every 1% tariff rate is a 1% hit to the deficit, which it absolutely does not work that way at all.
Yeah, so it's a bit confusing, but the idea is that, as an economist buddy of mine put it one time, he was on my radio show, he's a Dartmouth guy, we were talking about this, and he says, when you are a service economy and you have, a lot of services produced, typically what happens, manufactured types of goods. Now, certain manufactured goods are coming under fire because we've got to manufacture more things here is basically what's being talked about. We've got to take, like, for example, we don't want to have all of our steel imported from someplace else because we want to make things that are pretty critical to the United States, software, computer items and those types of things, drugs. We've talked about pharmaceuticals and those types of things. But he says, in essence, what happens is the country gets richer, they go more towards services, just like a family goes more towards services when they become more wealthy. So that's typically what has been happening. But here's the thing is that there are a lot of things that we just don't have here. There's certain raw materials and things like that we just don't necessarily produce in the United States and have to be imported, or goods. If you think about it, if you pull out a piece of clothing in your closet and you go, where was it made? Chances are pretty good it wasn't made in the United States. There's just a lot of things that we just don't do. And that's not that critical of a thing, clothing. We can make that anywhere. So that's really what they're talking about right there is what's the trade imbalance? And then they're saying, okay, so it's 50%. So what we're going to do is we're going to slap a tariff on you of 25%. So that's just a simple thing. They're saying that's what we're going to do, and that's where the number came from. But the question is, well, is that number really that accurate? And that will be debated heavily, and I think a lot of what is going to happen over the coming weeks is people are going to go, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because I just personally don't think it makes a whole lot of sense, and it will probably change, but the negotiating aspect of things, throwing something out there and seeing what sticks and what doesn't stick, that is Trump's style. And I stay apolitical, I try to stay out of this stuff because, as I often say, markets go up regardless of who is in office. Now, there are ways to make stocks go up that have nothing to do with increasing sales, have everything to do with decreasing costs, and there are a lot of ways that can happen. But here's the thing, is up through the first quarter of this year, this stuff has been happening. These debates have been happening, and we've been hearing about market declines as a result of this. A lot of people don't recognize that as U.S. markets have been doing this, international markets have actually been doing that, and at the end of the quarter, actually a really well-diversified portfolio would have been up in the first quarter of this year. In fact, when we look at, and like I said, I don't know how the day is going to end or how the week's going to end or anything like that, but if you look at what happened so far today, international markets have not been hit that hard at all compared to U.S. markets. And that's the problem. Most investors aren't very well diversified, number one. Number two, the other thing is that bonds, if you look at bonds, what we notice is that interest rates came down some, and that can improve the ability to buy things in the future. That's one of the goals, is try to get interest rates to come back down, and they have come down as a result of this, maybe not the way that somebody wanted it to happen, but it happened. And here's the thing, is that you typically have a positively sloped yield curve. That's usually what you'll see, where low or short-term interest rates are lower than long-term interest rates, and that's usually a better sign when that happens. So number one, that. Number two, the bonds, of course, because if interest rates have come down, what happens to bond prices? That's the part of the portfolio. As we get older, we have more bonds in the portfolio, and they've been coming up as I'm doing this video. They've been coming up some. And what I'm saying to you is that the portfolios, as we put them together, are designed to handle all kinds of things just like this. That's the idea, is we have to have, when we're putting together a portfolio, depending on your time horizon, where you are, how much money you need at any point in time, or how much you're going to take out, and income that you're going to take, and the level of your time horizons. We want to make sure that the portfolio is designed to weather no matter what happens, because this type of stuff happens. I mean, remember when COVID happened, you had these market declines because nobody really knew what was going on. And all of a sudden, a lot of people bailed out. There was this whole thing where people were bailing out of the stock market during COVID. And I was doing videos going, don't do this. This is really a bad idea. Your market timing. And then what happened was when markets came back, a lot of people missed it. So just want you to understand that this kind of stuff is, if anything is predictable, it's the unpredictability of markets and what happens in Washington, what happens around the world. But as time goes on, we start to see more clearly. And short-term movements like this, we don't want to make decisions based on them. Fear is a bad thing to make decisions based on. So I hope that helps. Hope you understand a little bit about what's going on here. And I'll do updated videos, and the radio show, of course. You can always tune into that as I talk more about these things on the show. Hope that helps.